dysfunction brings desperation. What have you let happen in seasons of desperation? What have you done in a singular moment that you swore you would never do? What did you settle on, sell short, or give into? Dysfunction is not an identity. It's a season. Often, when you think about your family, sometimes the thought is, we have these crazy dysfunctions like nobody else. But again, today, next on Family Bones, we're going to take a look at the story of Lot. And I promise you, you're going to want to strap in. Does anybody remember Choose Your Own Adventure books? Yeah, okay, I don't know what it is today. I don't know what kids do today. It's like Twitter. Choose Your Own Adventure books, you read 3 or 4 pages, and then it left you with some choices, and then those choices would take you to another part of the book, and then based off of the choices you made, the story was written. In the story of Lot, what we see is these choices writing the story, and I would argue for many of us, when we consider our families, what we'll find is so many of the dysfunctions we struggle through are a product of choice. So to fully get the grasp of this all, I actually got to take you back to Genesis 12 in order to paint a foundation, but we'll actually be in Genesis 14. You can follow along in your notes. If you have the Hope City app, there's a digital note place where you can fill in the blanks and follow along with us. But in chapter 12, where we find Lot is living alongside Abram. And Lot and Abram lived alongside, their families lived alongside of each other, which meant that they worked the same land. And God, in his blessing, began to grow both of these families. And as that family grew, as their herds grew, as their needs for resources grew, the land that they're living on wasn't enough. Matter of fact, it wasn't enough. It started showing itself in some of the tension between Abram's herdsmen, Lot's herdsmen, and even the neighbors around them. So what they decided to do, Abram said, it's time to split. And in a moment of generosity, it's the only thing I can think of, he looks at Lot and says, you choose first the land that you want to take your family to. And so in the moment of this all, Lot chooses this place called Sodom, which, quite honestly, we really can't blame him. I mean, hindsight being 2020, we know what we know today. It didn't necessarily turn out all that well. But for Lot, when he's making this decision, what we know about Sodom, according to Genesis 13, is that Sodom was a place that was rich with resources. The scripture says that it was well-watered everywhere, like the gardens of the Lord, or the beauty of the land of Egypt. So we're seeing tons of natural resources. Water was an absolute commodity in the middle of the desert. So this is a oasis. And Lot's like, well, if you're going to tell me to pick land, I want that. The problem is what we also know, and what Lot also knew, was that in this moment, Sodom also had a reputation for being people who, quite honestly, their land was filled with perversion. Scriptures like Ezekiel point this out. It says, the sins of your sister Sodom was this: she lived with her daughters in a lap of luxury. Again, because of the resources, it was a lap of luxury, proud, gluttonous, lazy. They ignored the oppressed and the poor. They lived obscene lives. So this reputation that Lot is struggling with now is, do I make a choice? Do I bring my family to this place that's flowing with resources, although we're living next to this perversion? And he's faced with this first question of compromise. Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. It says this: that evening, the 2 angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there. When he saw them, he stood up to meet them. Then he welcomed them, bowed his face to the ground. My lords, he said, come to my house to wash your feet and be my guests for the night. You may then get up early in the morning and be on your way. A couple things about this picture that's painted, and most theologians agree that Lot's place by the city walls communicates his influence in the city. So what would happen back in the day, right? So let's just pretend me, Jabbar, and I don't know, who else wants to play basketball with us later? Anybody? Okay, so me, Jabbar, and Angelina are playing basketball. Boom, 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 right? Angelina calls a foul. Jabbar looks at me and says, that's not a foul. They get into a fight. Angelina pops Jabbar in the mouth. Now we got to figure out, at this point, legal action, right? It wasn't like you can pick up the phone and call the cops. Hey, somebody get Angelina. She's dropping fools. Like that. So what would have to happen is that I, as the person who kind of sees this all, would take Angelina and Jabbar and we would go to the city gates. And at the city gates, there would be a collection of men, wise men, judges, who would sit at the city gates and they would hear the offenses of the people. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, Judge. It was crazy. Jabbar tried to cross her over. She got all upset. He hit her. She just stuck him. Boom! He fell like a rock. I don't know what to tell you. And in that moment, they were depending on the wisdom of those at the gate to help settle disputes. Where we find Lot is that he had assimilated so much into the city that they gave him access to the gates. You see the influence of Lot. And although Lot was an immigrant to this region, his seat at the city gates welcoming these visitors was a clear indication of the importance that he held in the city. And still, Lot was willing to compromise his family for this perceived place of influence among the people of Sodom. So what we'll see in Lot's life is that dysfunction first compromises family. Dysfunction compromises family. Listen, I know this is tough, and I'm just strap in. We're going to ask a lot of tough questions this morning. The first being this: what would you or what have you traded your family for? Again, I know this is a tough one, but if we're honest, it's a tension that many of us navigate almost every day. The obvious compromises are easy. If you got a toddler, you're not going to give them unfeathered access to the road in front of your house. So you know that the cost of that is watching your toddler and shutting your door. It's not a big sacrifice. Nobody's confused. You're not really willing to compromise. But what happens when the compromise seems like it's for the good? I know I told them I'd be home early this week, but man, this meeting is super important. It could probably propel me to the next level. I know I promised I'd be at that band concert, but I'll make it up next time. This is really important. CareerBuilder.com did a survey that 30% of parents admit to skipping important kids' events for work. But then there are the compromises that are not just about the family, but really about the spiritual condition of the home. The compromises we make in the name of peace. Now I'm speaking to my parent of teenagers. Any of them in the house today? There's a couple of y'all. It's hard for them to say anything because it's been a long week for a lot of them. I know I'm supposed to set this spiritual standard in my home. I don't want to drag my kids to church again. I know that we should be creating a home where the standard of this word is upheld, and I'm making sure I'm holding my kids accountable. Man, it's just easier to scroll and ignore. That word compromise basically means this. It means to accept standards that are lower than desirable. Joshua, speaking to the children of God, to Israel, in his famous kind of farewell address, relays this idea of standards really simply. I love this passage. If you don't have this one outlined, you might want to. Joshua chapter 20, verse 4, verse 14 says this: "So fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly." He's setting the standard. Here's the standard. He goes a step further. "Put away foreign idols of your ancestors' worship when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord alone." Verse 15. "But if you choose to compromise, if you refuse to serve the Lord and choose today whom you will serve, would you prefer the gods of your ancestors that you serve beyond the Euphrates, or will it be the gods of the Amorites whose land you now live? But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord." Our standards are determined by our choices, and every day we choose to either live in the standards that the Lord has for us, or we choose compromise. Lot was willing to compromise his family for the land because it was better. And I'm sure Lot thought, like many of us, yeah, Sodom's a pretty rough place, but I'm not going to let it affect me. And I'm sure for a season it felt like it was working out. In this season where we find Lot, his kids are about to get married and already have. He holds this position of influence at the gate. Things seem to be going well, but then verse 4. Before we actually read it, I just need you to know that in life, often we try to measure compromises in miles when the truth is compromises should be measured in inches. What I mean by that is that these things back up and back up and back up, and you may not even notice or understand these compromises until verse 4. Until those moments where that compromise finds you in positions you never thought you would be in. Remember, Lot had invited the angels over. The angels make their way over in verse 4, but before they retired for the night. So you can only imagine, the angels walked in. I don't know what you feed angels. For some reason in my head, I just thought it was marshmallows, but I don't know why. I just thought angels eat marshmallows. You can check my theology later. But they walk in, they clean their feet. Another weird thing they did back then, but I understand it. They're hanging out, they're eating. I'm sure Lot had a bunch of questions. I'm sure his family was close. And then before they retire, they start hearing things happening outside. All the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. Verse 5. They shouted, Lot, where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out so that we can have sex with them. I want to stop for a moment because I'm going to use the word sex and intercourse in this passage. It uses two different words to explain a similar action. But the reason I bring that up is because in the original language, what it infers is this idea of sex. The word in its original context actually infers without consent. So what we see is not just like intercourse between two people, but the desire was to basically violently take these men. It goes on to say, so Lot stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind him. Please, my brothers, he begged, don't do such a wicked thing. Verse 8, look, I have 2 virgin daughters. I told you this was going to get crazy. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. But please leave these men alone, for they're my guests and under my protection. Okay, wait, what? Lot had gone so far that he was literally willing to offer his daughters in sacrifice to this crowd. And notice what happens next is a little jarring too. Verse 9, stand back, they shouted. So now these are the people. This fellow came to our town as an outsider, and now he's acting like our judge. So let me remind you that he was sitting at the gate of the city. And in a moment, they were fine. They were totally okay with Lot's wisdom and Lot's advice and him sitting at the gate. But the moment Lot speaked against and challenged their lust, immediately, I don't know that fool, he's not one of us, and he's trying to stand in this position of judgment. What I've learned from not just this passage, but in the whole counsel of Scripture, there is a truth that says the world does not love you. Matter of fact, Jesus, knowing that this is going to be an issue with his disciples, in preparation for them, prays a specific prayer that gives us incredible insight to this truth. Watch this, John chapter 17, verse 16. It says this, I have given them your word, and the world hates me because they do not belong to the world. Just as I do not belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them from the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. They do not belong to the world any more than I do. So Jesus is framing this conversation around 3 truths. Number 1, the world will hate you. That's not a question. The world will hate you. And don't get it twisted. You can't take it personal. The world will hate anyone who does not belong to it. And then Jesus goes a step further and says, the reason you don't belong to it is because you belong to me. You don't belong to the world. The day you said yes to Jesus, you are no longer a citizen of this earthly kingdom. Paul calls us aliens and strangers. He wants you to know this is not home. And because it's not home, they won't love you. He goes a step further and says this. Jesus then asks that they would not be taken. If this is not home and this world isn't going to love us, why in the world wouldn't you take us? Well, because what Jesus understood was in order for people to understand and see the love of God, they needed his people. He positioned us to live in, but not of. That we would live close, but not of. And what we see with Noah is this internal tension where he was, or Lot, this internal tension where he was trying to figure out the balance of living in and not of. I need you to hear me. Lot was willing to compromise his family for what seemed to be the good thing. But sometimes even the good thing is just not good. He was surrounded, outnumbered, and in the middle of all that, willing to sacrifice those who are closest to him. But where dysfunction compromises family, in your compromise, God still rescues. Genesis chapter 19, verse 10, it says this, but the two angels reached out, pulled Lot into the house, bolted the doors. Then they blinded all the men, young and old, who were at the door of the house, so they gave up trying to get inside. Couple things about this incredible rescue is that it starts with the angel reaching out. Lot didn't look back. Lot didn't throw a flag, call for help. No. In the middle of all of this chaos, this angel reaches out, grabs a hold of him. Why I think that's such a beautiful picture is because the grace of God moves us even when we don't realize it. In the middle of our situations, when we're surrounded, when the enemy is raging, the Spirit of God is able to move us. Notice he bolts the door. He protects them. They blinded everyone. He gave them a way out. I think this is critical. David, who Emma mentioned earlier, but David in Psalms talks about the rescue of the Lord. In chapter 16, verse 18, or chapter 18, verse 16, he says this. He reaches down from the heavens and he rescued me. He drew me out of the deep water. He rescued me from my powerful enemies. For those who hated me were too strong for me. They attacked me at the moment when I was in distress, but the Lord supported me. He led me to a place of safety. He rescued me. And why? Because he delights in me. The psalmist lets us know that God still rescues. He still reaches down to pull us up. He still reaches under to hold us up. He still reaches back to lead us out. And why? Because we did all the right things or made all the right decisions. No. His reason is that he delights in you. This is a tough topic to grasp because quite honestly, there are seasons in my life where I don't even delight in myself. Where I consider my brokenness, when I consider my inconsistencies. If you thought that anyone on this stage was living in a place of perfection, I'm sorry, that's not the picture we're trying to paint. There are seasons of life where I struggle, where you struggle, where we struggle with this idea of even being delighted in ourselves, and yet he delights in us so much that he's willing to rescue in the middle of our compromise, in the middle of our brokenness. And the problem is, though, unfortunately, that although he provides rescue, dysfunction hesitates when God says go. Any horror movie fans in the house? Nobody? Nobody likes horror? Oh, there's one. Okay, two. That's it? That's only two people in this whole room that like horror movies. Okay, well, if you don't like horror movies, let me cue you in. One of the reasons that I don't know, they don't scare me. I'm really not interested. Because a lot of times with horror movies, it's like just unrealistic. Like the unrealistic nature of a horror movie. What are you talking about? Like there's noises coming from the back room. There's a blood trail. 8 of your friends have already died. There's an axe sticking in the door. And the statement is, I have to go figure out what's happening. Dude, what? They start walking down the aisle, the hallway. You're hearing screams from the back room, and they're like, I'm just curious. It's funny, because as silly as it sounds, how many times do you hear a noise in your house, and you lean over to your husband and like, go figure out what that is? I have long told Jess, I was like, you go figure it out. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But now I have 14-year-olds, so I'm like, hey, you guys figure out what? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, like we're quick, right? Like if you've ever watched those movies, half the fun is sitting in the back saying, no, he's in that room. Like we're screaming at the top of our lungs like the movie's going to change, right? But there's this idea that the decision is so easy. Like it's so easy. Why are you hesitating? They're surrounding the home. They're threatening to destroy these angels. Like this is ugly. And in the moment, all of the signs point to an exit. It would be so easy if life, like the movies, made it just so obvious, but often it's not. Lot begins to tell his family, but no one listens. And I know that if we've had this type of depravity and we've seen people calling for this type of ugliness, I think you and I would be like, where's the exits? They're blind, let's run. It makes me think that some of the hesitation in Lot's family is probably a product that they had been living among this community for so long that they had grown desensitized to it. And the thing that Lot would at one point was like, oh, this might not affect me, is definitely affecting his children. His wife ignored him. His daughters and son-in-laws. His daughters ignored him, and his son-in-laws thought he was joking. They thought this was a game. It's funny because what happens in this moment is Lot's influence in the city was exposed earlier. But now Lot's expected or intended influence in his family is now being exposed. They didn't listen. And still, God shows up. Genesis chapter 19, verse 15. At dawn the next morning, the angels became insistent. Harry, they said to Lot, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here. Get them out right now, or you will be swept away in the destruction of the city. When Lot still hesitated, the angel seized his hands and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and rushed them outside of the city, for the Lord was merciful. Verse 17. When they were safely out of the city, one of the angels ordered, run for your lives. Here's the directions. Run. Don't stop. Don't look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains or you will be swept away. Move down with me to verse 23. Lot reached the village just as the sun was rising over the horizon. Then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the skies of Sodom and Gomorrah. He literally destroyed them along with the other cities and villages of the plain, wiping out all the people and every bit of vegetation. But Lot's wife looked back. And as she was following behind him, she turned into a pillar of salt. Do you get the reference from earlier now? Salty? There it is. Here's what we know. If dysfunction hesitates when God says go, in your hesitation, God still provides a way. He still provides the way. The angel sees Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters, rushed them out of the city. He carried them out of danger and then directs them to safety. And notice his direction, because I think this is critical. Number 1, he says, here is the plan, run. Don't walk. Time's a priority. Run. You don't have time. But then he says, don't look back. Why? Because it's almost impossible to run forward while you're looking backwards. I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a moment. I think as a culture, we have fallen in love with the idea that if we do enough analysis in what happened to us, what happened yesterday, that somehow we're going to have freedom for tomorrow. I'm not against the idea that there's some things you can be healed of here. But if you're not focused on tomorrow, you'll never see the promises that God has for you tomorrow. Some of us have become slave to trying to push up every rock and go around every corner, evaluating every relationship to figure out how we got here. And again, I'm not telling you that there's no benefit at all, but really there is this thought within that's been creeping up within my gut, within the context of a lot of the things that I read, some of the ministers that I'm speaking to now, is what we have to be careful of, is if we can't look forward, we can never move forward. And in this picture, what we see is her inability to keep her eyes forward communicated her lack of trust. She didn't trust the plan. Like, Pastor John, how do you know that she didn't trust the plan? Because trust is revealed in obedience. I'm obsessed with measuring everything. I like everything except food. I just eat it. But I mean, just everything else. My team is actually probably a little annoyed because everything is like, oh, that sounds like a great thing to do. How do we measure it? But when it comes to your relationship with the Lord, stop saying you trust him, but you won't obey him. Your trust is measured in obedience. When my boys were young, and they were small enough, like where I can put them on one of those scooters that you rent, we'd go to Uptown, and my wife would like freak out, but they loved it because they would be petrified of trying to get on that thing themselves. But when Dad got on it, I would say, come on, bud, jump on. And Micah would jump or Noah would jump on the front of it, and they would hold on to that bar. And I would hold my knees around them so that they wouldn't go anywhere. And that's how we would get around the park. You can tell me I'm a bad parent, whatever, bro. They loved it, right? I was the world's greatest dad. The minute I parked that thing, they would not even touch it. Why? Because they weren't trusting the scooter. They were trusting Dad. Yeah. They did what Dad said. Wish they trust me a little more now. But you know what I'm saying? Like, trust is revealed in obedience. She didn't trust the directive of the Lord. And when she looked back, unfortunately, what happened. We struggle when it comes to trusting the Lord. That's why the scripture is clear about his plan. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11 says, I know the plans that I have for you, say the Lord. They are good. And they're not for disaster, to give you a hope and a future. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says it this way, trust in the Lord with all your heart. He can take the weight of your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Why? Because you can't trust your own heart. Seek him in all that you do, and he will show you what? Which path to take. My favorite of all of these is Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19. It says this, for I am about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through what? The wilderness. Why? Because we will face wilderness seasons. If someone hasn't told you, let me tell you. I know that doesn't really sound hopeful, but all of us will find ourselves in seasons of wilderness. But the glory of God says that he shows up with a plan. Not only does he show up with a pathway in the middle of your wilderness, there will be seasons of dry wasteland. What's dry wasteland? Dry wasteland is a representation that no matter what I do, nothing's productive. Have you been there before? Where everything you know to do just ends in death. And yet the beauty of this scripture is God has a plan for the middle of your dry valley, in the middle of your wasteland season. I create rivers in dry wastelands. You can trust in his plan. You can pull the full weight of your heart on him. He was creating pathway in the middle of your depression and anxiety and despair, but you have to trust that when he creates a pathway, you can trust in his directive. That you can trust in his directive. Unfortunately, when we're not willing to move in his plan and in his timing, dysfunction brings desperation. If you thought this family was already crazy, strap in. A lifetime surrounded by depravity, not willing to trust in God's plan, desperation steps in, and the ugliness of the season just gets uglier. Chapter 19, verse 31. One day the older daughter said to her sister, there are no men left anywhere in this entire area, so we can't get married like everyone else. And our father will soon be too old to have children. Come, Let's get him drunk with wine. Then we'll have sex with him. That way, we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night, they got him drunk with wine, and the older daughter went in and had intercourse with her father. He was unaware of her lying down and getting up again. The next morning, the older daughter said to her younger sister, I had sex with our father last night. Let's get him drunk with wine again tonight and go in and have sex with him. That way, we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night, they got him drunk with wine again. And the younger daughter went in and had intercourse with him as before. He was unaware of her lying down or getting up. And I know, I read that passage and you're like, John, never in a million years. That's crazy. This is where the story gets crazy, I know. But can I ask you a question? What have you let happen in seasons of desperation? What have you done in a singular moment that you swore you would never do? When you've ran as far as you can run, you went out, you got every excuse in the book. What did you settle on, sell short, or give into? Now, I just need you to be clear because I don't want to villainize these two girls. Culturally, they knew that lineage was critical. They knew that their father's lineage, if it didn't carry on, that family was done. It's different today than then, and really they thought that the only thing they can contribute, which, socially, the only thing they could contribute was the continuing on of his name, and that only happens if they got married, and unfortunately, every eligible bachelor didn't get voted off on the island, got incinerated in the valley. Every eligible bachelor is now gone. So culturally, in this moment, they're at a place of desperation, knowing what they should do, and still choosing to do something to get to the end. How many of us have done things in the name of getting to the end? Things that we would never do in a million years, but somehow we use this phrase, the ends justify the means. Desperation will make you do the unthinkable. Several years ago, we had a chance to go to Haiti. At that point, the country had just been ravished by another earthquake, and they had had hurricanes a season before, political uncertainty, so the island was a mess. And we went with an organization that was setting up, and they have done a phenomenal job creating resources for the island, teaching people how to farm the land, creating food sources, providing those foods to different educational structures around the island so that kids didn't have to go to school hungry. It was beautiful what they've done. But when we got there, this was just the beginning. And so there was a group of 5 or 6 pastors, and we're trying to figure out how we can best partner. I don't even honestly know that was a trip because at this point, I'm just kind of a youth guy. And my pastor was like, you want to go to Haiti? And I'm like, sure, I'll go wherever you tell me to go. And we went, and we had coffee in between 2 appointments. We're right on the border lines of Haiti and DR. If you've ever been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so this coffee shop was built out of the mountain. So you get your coffee inside and you walk out and you can see what seems like the whole of Haiti from this mountaintop. And as we're there, I'm just fascinated by the view. And the missionary who were working alongside walks over and points his finger out. He said, you see that over there? And there was a little village out by the coast. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. We go in there or something? He's like, yeah, we'll be there in 2 days. But I wanted you to know, recently they did a study because there's been a spike in the death of toddlers. For some reason, that age demographic has seen a sharp spike in fatality. So I'm like, oh yeah. He's like, yeah, the report just came out. What they found was there's such famine in that area that these kids are being incredibly malnourished. And so in the desperation, these kids wake up and the only thing they can do is cry all day. So what the moms would do is they would grab whatever they could in the house and put a combination of dirt and vegetable oils or, pieces of whatever grass they can put together. And they would bake what they called dirt cookies. And we did some research and found that it wasn't just in Haiti, but in a lot of third world countries when they're struggling with famine, this is what they do. And they find that it'll quiet the kid for the moment, But eventually, the toxicity of what they put in the body leads to the child's early demise. And I'm sitting at the top of this mountain in tears. Because this is why we came, right? Like to figure out how to resource that thing, but I just couldn't imagine the desperation of a mom. And I know you want to point fingers and people are appalled at the story, and yet I'm like, you've never woken up with a kid who's cried from the time they woke up to the time they went to sleep. And you have no options. You have no options. In desperation, we do crazy things. In your desperation, you have done some things. That desperation for that thing, that raise at the job, that extra security in the bank, as long as I just need a little bit more stored away, that relationship or the idea of a relationship, that one more dopamine hit from whatever addiction is feeding it, our desperation will cause us to do crazy things we would never imagine doing. But when dysfunction brings desperation, in your desperation, hear me, God works all things for his good. This has been the most challenging message that we have prepared in months. Because when you read the story in its context, you're like, John, where's the hope in this? Let me kind of tell you the end of this story, which is kind of nuts. These two girls produced two children that in the immediate future from the story become huge enemies to the children of God. But eventually, out of one of those family lines comes this woman named Ruth. Out of Ruth's storyline and lineage, we see and can trace her ancestry to King David. And then what we know about King David is that Mary and Joseph are products of that lineage, and out of that gathering and through the Spirit of God, we see the birth of Jesus. So the detestable act in desperation, through God's grace, he turns for his good. Here's why this was such a struggle. 2 Peter chapter 2 says this, but God also rescued Lot out of Sodom because he was a righteous man who was sick of shameful immorality for the wicked people around him. Yes, Lot was a righteous man who was tormented in his soul by wickedness when he saw and heard day after day. John, wait, what? We've just spent 30 minutes talking about these choices. How is it that Peter says he's righteous? And this is what we've settled on. And you might want to write this down because you're going to hear that ad nauseum until the end of this series. Dysfunction is not an identity. It's a season. Stop calling your family dysfunctional. That's not their identity. Often we claim things are our identity because we don't want to deal with the fact that, listen, no, that dysfunction is there because of choices. John, you don't know, we're hardwired. We got all these things. It's a part of who we are. No. What I know about the God that we serve is that even if those things were true, he is making all things new. Dysfunction doesn't have to be an identity. It can be a season. It can be a season. And the beauty of the God that we serve is that seasons are a product of wrong choices. So what I mean by that is you can make the right choices and move into a season of grace and love and purpose. God is in the business of rewriting family trees. It is the joy of my life. The joy of my life. To meet people who come from brokenness, that come from seasons of dysfunction, where mom and dad were all over the place, where there was no consistency, where they maybe have never met a parent, and they come into a relationship with God to grow and do life with them, that they are 2 and 3 generations later, and I'm holding their grandkids in my hand, and they don't even smell like smoke. Why? Because we serve a God who is able that in the worst of our dysfunction, he's still able to extend his grace and mercy, and he's able to work things all out for his good, but it requires just one choice. And that choice is whether or not you have said yes to him.